If the vaccinated people started going out 3 times as much as they did and the unvaccinated people didn't, then they'd roughly be at the same infection risk. But there's 2 very big ifs in that. You're obviously right that the more you go out, other things being equal, the greater the infection rate is going to be for you, the greater the chances that you're going to be infected. But actually saying exactly how much it goes up is another matter, because it's really difficult to pick that out. And also because there's not very much good data on differences in behavior between vaccinated and unvaccinated people. One point to take into account is it isn't only vaccinated people are going out more than they did. The same is probably true of unvaccinated people too. All sorts of reasons for that. Maybe their employer doesn't let them work at home so much, so they've got to go into the office and meet people, go on the train or however they commute. There are more opportunities to go out. You can go to football matches now, you can go to music festivals and concerts and things like that, which nobody, vaccinated or not, had the chance to do until fairly recently. And so it's probably the case that the chance of getting infected has gone up in both unvaccinated and vaccinated people. What that actually means in practice depends on what the overall risk is in the 2 groups. If things are really awful and the chance of getting infected in a fairly short time was 10%, say, in unvaccinated people, that would mean it'd be cut to 3% in the vaccinated people, which is a good reduction. But on the other hand, if there's not much infection about and there's, say, 1 in 1,000 risk of unvaccinated people getting infected, well, it'd be 3 in 10,000 in the vaccinated people, and that would be a reduction. In one sense, it's a substantial reduction, but on the other hand, it's a very low risk. And sorting those out from one another isn't very clear. How much you go out is unlikely to make any substantial difference to whether you're going to end up in hospital. But the point is that there's an effect of vaccination protecting you against severe illness and death, which is greater than its effect on just stopping you get infected at all. That's really why we needed vaccines. That they were designed to reduce symptomatic infection, and a lot of people who get infected still don't have any symptoms, but also to reduce the impact of hospitalization and death, it's a real serious illness. And they do pretty well against hospitalization and death. That is, if you do get infected, the older you are, the more likely you are to end up in hospital if you get infected. But this reduction in the chance of ending up in hospital of about 95%, reducing it to a 20th of what the risk would otherwise be, seems to be fairly constant across those age groups. So an older person, someone in their 80s, would have a much higher risk of ending up in hospital if they're infected than a person in their 20s or 30s. But the reduction in that risk in both ages does seem to reduce it to about a 20th of what it would otherwise be. It varies a bit, but it doesn't vary very much. And so that does, in a sense, mean that the sort of gain from being vaccinated, in the sense you're not going to get really ill, is greater for older people or other groups that are at high risk for some reason. In order to work out those rates of who gets infected, you need to know how many people got infected out of vaccinated people and unvaccinated people of a certain age. The vaccination service has got records of how many people they vaccinated. They might not be exact to the nearest one, but that's pretty well known. But how do you know how many unvaccinated people there are? We don't know exactly, and there's no way of finding out. There's very clear evidence that the risk was much greater in unvaccinated people. And, you know, tinkering around with the total population estimates does make a difference to them, but it doesn't change the picture in an important way.